Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Home Tech Podcast. Jason Griffin here. So happy to have you with us. And assuming he hasn't blown away, I'm joined as always by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, you still there?
Yeah, man, I'm hanging in. Hanging in there.
Hold on tight. We'll get through this show.
Yeah, there's a tropical storm here in Florida, so you can hear the wind in the background. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, it sounds like you're having some crazy weather out there.
Yeah. It's mostly been rain here. Actually, we went on vacation over the last weekend and had a couple of the showers that were thrown off, blow through in the afternoon. But it's been beautiful weather. Had a great time. Just rented a little like a cabin thing down on one of the islands down south, and just
very nice.
Yeah, stayed there for the weekend
and got back and home just in time for a tropical storm.
Yeah. It's good how that lines up, right?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hopefully nothing too serious and everybody's safe, and appreciate you powering through a show with me here.
Yeah, no problem. If the power stays on, then I'll power through the show.
Right.
But it's cut off a couple of times.
Yep. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed, and to that end, let's jump right in. We've got bunch of news stories here. Busy week. We did not line up a guest for this week. I'm want to tease. I'm a little bit excited about this. We've got Vin Bruno, CEO of Cedia, coming on next week to join us to do a little bit of a look ahead for the big trade show that's right around the corner. And so I'm really looking forward to chatting with Vin. But this week, Seth, I thought we would just sit down and kick around some news stories. Definitely a busy week, so we're going to touch on a bunch of that. But before we jump in, kind of first and foremost, wanted to give a big shout out to a new patron that came on board, TJ Huddleston, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but TJ, if you're listening, huge thank you. Really appreciate you coming on at that $5 a month level. Your support means a lot, and just wanted to give you a quick shout out on air.
Yep. Thanks, TJ. We really appreciate anybody who, like yourself, you definitely very generous and have donated at the $5 and up level, which on our show gets you invited over to the Slack channel where you can participate in our conversations there, and we get to mention here on the air at the $5 and up level. If you don't want to, or you can't donate $5, you can donate, I think, as little as $1 a month to the cause over at HomeTech.fm/support. And there's a number of ways that you can support the show, including leaving feedback. Send us a message, ask a question, throw us a news story that, you see that you find pretty compelling. We definitely take all that into consideration, and it definitely helps get our show put together each week.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started here. Like I said, busy news week, and we're going to touch on a number of stories, but we're going to come right out of the gate here with a big one. And Seth, I believe you predicted this back on episode 124, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. Sonos officially has an API. So huge news, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And we're going to kick this story around for a little bit here and talk about some of the implications.
Yeah, this was a mystery event that they were touting a couple of weeks ago. I think we touched briefly on it. We had some ideas of what may have come out of it, and an API was my guess, but they came out with a couple of more things. The API is one part of it, but they also announced that they'll be doing voice control integration with the Amazon Echo system. Which I think is awesome. That's really all I need. I can yell at Sonos, hey, play this music, or yell at the Alexa and say, play this music, and it'll come out of the Sonos speakers and sound so much better than it would coming out of the little tube thing that Amazon supplies.
Yeah, I think that was a smart move. We speculated on that back when there was some shakeup going on at Sonos, and there was a little bit of speculation that maybe the company was struggling. And my thought at the time was that sentiment maybe got a little overplayed, and that the shift at Sonos was, in a sense, a proactive move to get out in front of some of the trends that they saw going on in the market. And it was time that they made a slight pivot, so to speak. And I think that they have been busy, obviously, working on a number of things. And this event was sort of the culmination of that. So you talked about the API. Voice control, I think, is an interesting move. At the time, we were wondering if Sonos was looking at voice control and was going to come out with their own iteration of it. And I think that, teaming up with Alexa here with Amazon was a smart move, in my opinion. I think that smart home and home technology fans in general will be happy to hear that. I'm glad to see that we're not going to have yet another sort of protocol or voice control technology coming into the market, and maybe we'll start to see that things can, I shouldn't say start, but continue to gravitate around Amazon Alexa. They've got a ton of momentum and a nice implementation, but I know there are some downsides to that too, Seth, and you pointed them out over on our Slack channel, which you mentioned earlier, about Amazon being a little bit limited in terms of language. I believe they're only American English right now. Is that correct?
Yes, U.S. English only. I don't even think they work in Canada. They definitely aren't sold overseas, and I think
too thick of an accent, eh?
Well, I mean, you think about it. I mean, voice is hard to do, and this is what I was really worried about when people were, oh, Sonos has got microphones built into their speakers. They're going to do their own voice control. Voice is tough, and it's not. You're not just picking out one language. Sonos is sold internationally, so if they can team up with someone like Amazon, who has a presence internationally, and hopefully will one day have the voice control recognize other languages besides the one that we speak. I think it's a smart move, at least long term. Sonos isn't bogged down trying to reinvent the wheel that Amazon and Google and Apple are doing so well. They can just tie in with a product that is sitting on the countertop in most of their clients' houses, and you just yell at it and it works. And I'm super excited for this integration. I think it needed to happen a long time ago, and I'm glad to see Sonos doing it. We mentioned this in the past, but Amazon's going to have a big presence at CEDIA this year. They have their own booth. I mean, think about that. Amazon has their own booth
is pretty wild.
At CEDIA.
Yeah.
So I suspect that there will be a lot more coming out of CEDIA around voice integration with the home, with Amazon having a presence there.
Yeah, and I think it's encouraging to see companies like Amazon and Sonos, and actually we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about Eero, which is a Wi-Fi startup, and to see these companies embracing the integrator, I think is a huge win for us as an industry. I think we've talked about it, kind of ad nauseum, right, about just the DIY convergence and everything that's going on. And I think that needs to be a two-way street, and it shouldn't be the job of the CEDIA channel to have to evolve exclusively to this more consumer-focused technology. But these companies should be looking to us as an industry. I mean, we've got decades of expertise and knowledge about bringing disparate technologies together in the home, what it takes to implement that, what it takes, more importantly, I would argue, to support it, what clients really want out of their systems, what they maybe think they want but don't really, all this sort of nuance that we've spent decades building. I think there's some real value there. And so I'm encouraged to see companies like Amazon and Sonos finally embracing the space. Sonos has been one that we've talked about for years as an industry. Where's our API? Where's our integration? And that it was all the more reason to, for my surprise when I read one of the articles, I believe this was quoted straight out of the press release. I'm not sure. I saw it in the 9to5 Mac article, but Sonos president Patrick Spence, I'm going to quote here real quick, said, "Custom installers are at the vanguard of making the connected home a reality. For years, they have worked tirelessly to bring disparate technologies together and are pushing hard to make the smart home both accessible and ubiquitous. Our work together ensures our sound platform integrates well with their systems now and in the future." And I was pleasantly surprised to see that nod from Sonos nonetheless.
Yeah, that's good things. I mean, we're definitely one of their number one. I wouldn't say they're number one. Maybe we are. I'm not sure, but we're definitely sell a lot of Sonos product through the CEDIA channel, through all the dealers that are out there. It's a very, very, very popular product among us.
Oh yeah, without question. So let's talk a little more in depth about the API, Seth. I want to get your take on it as the developer here amongst us. And I know that, there's been some interesting conversation about what impact, if any, does this have on existing integrations. So Control4 comes to mind as an example. They've had an integration with Sonos for years. Savant has their recent integration, which we can talk about as sort of a separate conversation and what's going on there. And maybe they've had access to the API before anyone, and we don't know that. But there are some interesting things you can speculate there. But I think in general, Seth, I'd be curious for your perspective, not only as a developer, but as a long-time Control4 guy, what impact do you think this is going to have on the existing Control4 integration as an example?
Control4 is very interesting. Well, let's take a step back. Before we have 2 points in time, before the API and after the API. So after the API, we have somewhat of a limited integration using the official API for Crestron, Control4, Deutsche Telekom's, I don't even know how to say Quivi icon. I'm not even sure.
I'm not even going to try.
Yep. iPort, Lutron, and Savant. So they all have this access to this, I don't know, I would say limited new official API. With one slight exception we'll talk about later. Control4 has been working on Sonos integration for, I want to say like 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, because they bought the company that was doing it, Extra Vegetables. They bought the talent. They basically acqui-hired them.
Right.
And Extra Vegetables has been, selling that driver for Sonos systems long before Sonos was as popular as it was, as it is today. And to do that, they really got down deep and did some reverse engineering on Sonos's UP&P the specification. And it's a standard, but it's not like an official standard. It's basically something that Sonos could customize to whatever they wanted to do, and they could change it if they want to. But the communication standard that UP&P uses would be the same. Like you would just need to look up the definitions for the words that they're using for play and pause, and they're there for you to use. And you see a lot of people using that. Vera comes to mind. My Vera, can integrate with Sonos using that UP&P standard. And it works just fine. I can send play, pause, stop. I can select music and rooms. With a lot of scripting, I can do a lot more. And that's what the Extra Vegetable guys, and then as they were hired into Control4, they continued to work on. And they made a much more seamless integration between Sonos and Control4 products. So they have that, and it exists. The question is, moving forward, what happens to that product? Does it live alongside the official one, or do they get combined together? I'm not even sure how this looks, because in the CE Pro article, Paul Williams, who is the VP of Solutions at Control4, said that they'll be shipping a driver within the next 30 days, which kind of has my head, I'm scratching my head. Do we have 2 different drivers here? One that's the limited official API, and then one that's the reverse engineered Control4. Hey, we've had this for 6 years, mm-hmm. And why would I even use the official one if it's just selecting playlists and favorites? If I can do the deep integration, select channels and go right into Pandora and Napster and Deezer and all that right through the unofficial version. Why would I bother with that one? So
yeah,
I'm really curious to see what this looks like. And I'm hoping that we see it at CEDIA. They're saying that all these vendors will be showing them at CEDIA. So I'm going to definitely go around the floor and look at all of these and see what's what. I'm just not, I can't imagine that Control4 would show something limited, by, the official API and say, oh, this is great. I don't even think Sonos would do that. And say, oh, you can't do all the stuff you did 3 weeks ago now. Isn't that great?
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Well, I think the argument, I don't know. I guess the argument could be made that this is a solid foundation to build on, and that, reverse engineered UP&P solution, who knows? I just don't know. I kind of have this instinctive reaction to anytime I hear reverse engineered. I just think, well, this is a hack basically. And, kind of my knee jerk reaction, admittedly, is that, well, what happens when Sonos changes something and then everything breaks and I can't get support? And to me, as a home technology professional, that's a big deal. If it was just me using it in my house, well, whatever, I'll figure it out, or I'll just use the Sonos app until things get ironed out. But when I've got a huge deployed base of systems in my client homes, I want to use something that's rock solid and that's endorsed and supported by both companies so that I know 100% I've got their blessing to do what I'm doing and I've got their support if something goes wrong. And so I think that it's a bit of a nuanced and kind of frankly boring argument for a manufacturer to make at Cedia. And I don't know that that's what they're going to go to, but I think deep down it's in Control4's interest, it's in Sonos' interest, and all of their other partners they listed, Lutron, Savant, everybody else. I think it's in their best interest long term to get in line with the API. So I think the conversation is interesting in the immediate term, like what does happen to all that IP and everything that's behind the former Extra Vegetables driver that's now Control4's driver. What are the implications there? I don't think that Sonos will deliberately go out and break that integration, because I think it would ultimately just reflect badly on them to just deliberately go change their UPnP, I don't know, structure or language, whatever the terminology would be, in some way that would limit those existing integrations. I don't see them doing that.
No, and they've said so much. They said, we currently have no plans to deliberately impact existing solutions that are not supported. But the key is that they're currently not supported. Meaning, like you said, you have a problem with it and Control4 disappears tomorrow, or Extra Vegetables had disappeared. You would not have had any support to make that work. And that's what the API is key here. You're right. In that respect, the API is key. It's a commitment from Sonos saying we're committed to you guys making this stuff work on your products. And now that we have that commitment, that's awesome. I'm just not going to use a product that is, I don't know if people are going to use a product that is less than what they're used to installing and selling, if that makes any sense. And especially if it's not going to break.
Yeah. And we should probably touch on, I quite honestly don't know enough to get super specific, but I know in a lot of the articles I've read that there is talk that this API is pretty limited right now in terms of what it gives you. So basic transport control, I think maybe the ability to call up like favorites and things like that, but not much beyond that. So I don't know if you have a specific understanding of what's included and what's not beyond what I've already covered, but I think it's, they've come out and said this is just the beginning. This is just a start, and they want to make sure everybody knows that.
Baby steps. You got to start somewhere. I think we should touch on the Crestron integration, because they're doing a little spin on this, and they're doing it different from everyone else. And I'm not sure if it's just because Crestron can and because they have the ability to do this. I'm not sure how this works, but what they were doing, I think in the past, with Crestron, they throw you over to the Sonos app to select your things, and then you end up coming back into the Crestron app somehow. Now it
kind
looks
of like a page flip within the app.
Yeah, like a page flip,
basically,
exactly.
Just calling up a web server, whatever.
Now it looks like you're getting a 100% Sonos app within the Crestron touch panel, which sounds really interesting to me. And I can't wait to see how this works. At the Sonos booth, because obviously Crestron isn't showing this year. But I can't wait to see this at the Sonos booth and give it a go and see how this works, because that's one of my biggest complaints with Control4's implementation, is that you actually have to use the Control4 GUI. You have to use their user experience. You have to go through the Control4 app. It's very limited. It's very slow. Whereas the Sonos implementation of their product, they can spend the extra time making sure that it works smoothly and flawlessly, and the animations are smooth and all that good stuff. It's not like a list view that you get in the Control4 app. It's made and tailored for what they want their experience to be. So I would love to see that come to Control4, and if that's what they're doing, that's awesome. In the future, but I just want to see what this looks like with Crestron, because this sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and the other angle to that story, like I want to see it. I'm with you. I want to see that at Cedia, because I'm trying to understand what exactly that means. As far as the user experience specifically, but I think there's a different conversation here, and I almost hesitate to go back to it because we've had it so many times, but I think we just have to. And I was engaged with a pretty lively Twitter conversation with a guy who is the CEO over at Access Networks, and we're going to talk about him again later here in one of our stories I mentioned earlier. But he pointed out something, Seth, that I think you would have been interested to hear, and he just asked flat out: is there a sense of irony to this story that Crestron kind of showed a disinterest in the Resi channel as some people perceived it by pulling out of Cedia, but now they're kind of at the vanguard of this new Sonos integration story. And what does that mean? Is there a little bit of schizophrenia going on here? And I think it goes back to the conversation we've been having. And I think, you've said you kind of think Crestron is done with Resi. And I think where we've come down on that is that, your opinion on that, or if you're an integrator out there and you think that, I think it's important to define, like, does Crestron think that they're done with Resi? Like, are you saying Crestron's done with Resi as in they're going down the wrong path and they're going to become irrelevant, they just don't know it yet? Or are you saying that they've kind of don't care about Resi and they've given up on it?
I feel if what hasn't taken place in the last, with the new gentleman being brought on as the, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, being brought in as the sales manager, I guess, for the
right residential.
Side. If that hadn't happened and he hadn't really pushed for that, I felt at the time when we saw this, I felt that Crestron was going the way of AMX. Honestly,
yeah,
that's what it looked like, and now it doesn't look much different from, like, if you look at Crestron as a whole, like, and think about how small and insignificant the residential sales are for them right now. This is a big thing for them. This is good for them, but it's not like this is something they needed to have. They needed to have this, a couple of years ago, because right now they're playing catch up. Like I said, Control 4 had this 5-6 years ago. Crestron is making headlines getting this today. I mean, they're playing catch up. That's hands down. That's the problem that we're seeing with Crestron at this point in Resi. Control 4 is number one at this point, and I don't think anybody can deny that. There's probably a lot of Crestron guys that say, "Oh no, you still can't do this, and this," and that's fine for the 1% of the projects that's gonna come across. But for the vast majority of dealers out there, if you look in the CE Pro 100, they're using Control 4. And they found a good solution there. I think you're going to continue to see the numbers slide from Crestron, despite their efforts to make headlines like this. And we'll see. But I don't think they're going to become a number 2, maybe number 3 player. And I think it's going to happen a little bit faster than I think some of the die in the wool blue guys are going to be willing to accept.
Big blue.
Yeah. Big blue.
Yeah. So we'll move on from that. I do think it's interesting just to see that dynamic with Crestron, but we've talked about that so much that let's move on here. We're going to stay on this Sonos story for just another couple minutes here. There's one other thing, Seth, that we were talking about, mentioned earlier, the Savant integration, and I'm very interested to know. I'm curious. So what I'm wondering is, Savant has been talking about their Sonos integration since Cedia last year. And it really was not until, I don't know, a couple of months ago that we finally saw it, get put out into the wild. And so one of the things that Savant dealers have been kind of questioning is, well, why is Savant's integration so bare bones? Like, there's not much to it. And personally, I don't have a problem with that. We've had this conversation in my office quite a bit. And, I think that sometimes less is more. And if it's simple and it just works, and, we're able to help the client set up some playlists and favorites, and then the Savant integration is really just calling those as opposed to specific songs and what have you. Yeah, I get it. That's limited. But if it's easy to use and all of our customers get it, and we don't get a ton of questions and confusion about it, then I think there is value there. But that was always my take. And now that I'm seeing this API from Sonos come out and hearing about its limitations and what it's capable of, I'm wondering if Savant was using that API before anyone else. I just have to wonder, because if they were using the same UPnP kind of reverse engineering that Control 4 had done, why would they have come out with such a limited integration. And so this is pure speculation. I have nothing, no sources or inside information to back this up, but I just have to wonder if maybe Savant had access to that API a while ago and they've just been keeping it quiet. They were always a little bit evasive about that when I did ask people that I know there, how did you guys do it? What did you kind of reverse engineer it? I never really got a straight answer. It was just the party line was always, well, our engineers and their engineers worked very close together, and they have the same venture capital fund funding them at least partially, and so there was kind of ties at the highest level, and that was always talked about, but never really the specific technology. So I find that pretty curious, and I don't know what the implications are, but it's just something I'm kind of wondering about now.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure that you could do everything that the API provides today. Well, I know you can do everything the API provides today with the UPnP interface. And limiting is not bad. I mean, I don't want to say that it is, or pretend that it is. Like, I love that the integration with Control 4 is so deep, but it also has the problem of being like 100% Control 4 or nothing. Like you have to. Well, I guess that's not technically true, but you are better off being in the Control 4 app and operating Sonos from there, rather than going over to the Sonos app and trying to do things from there and hoping that they sync up. It does kind of work that way, but it's best if everybody kind of just plays ball and uses the Control 4 app. The thing is, I don't know how much Savant. To me, it seems like they could have done, or anybody could have done the integration that Savant has. But I like what they have because it's so simple too. Like, the simplicity is what you're talking about. Like, you just have to make sure it's simple, easy, and what people want to do. And do people want to have like the ability to add a Pandora station within the tiny little touch screen on their Savant remote? I don't know. Probably not. And so the integration that they have introduced is probably the best integration for that form factor. I
agree.
Simple is better in some situations, and I think that's definitely one of them.
Yep.
One of the other things I wanted to bring up real quick before we change topics is the little thing towards the end of the press release. They say, or Sonos says, that they're going to be teaming up with Airbnb, which I thought was really interesting. At the top of the show, I mentioned that we went on vacation, and the little cottage that we rented had a Sonos player in it, and I had no access to the Wi-Fi that it was on or anything, but it had a little label sitting on top that said, press this button and music will start playing. And so I pressed it, and of course, no music started playing. And I had no ability to like do anything with this little Play One that's sitting there in the room. I would have loved to play music. So if Sonos teams up with Airbnb and makes it where if I travel somewhere and they have a Sonos system, and I just can open up my Sonos app and connect to their Sonos system, and it basically converts everything over to me, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I really hope that's what they're doing with this.
That is interesting. And it reminds me of episode we did. I'm looking here back in April as you were talking. I pulled it up. Episode 107. So HomeTech.fm/107 will get you there if you're interested. And we had a gentleman by the name of Alex Nigg on, and he is from a company called Properly. And that was a really interesting conversation about, what he's doing with smart home technology in general. And he's a big Airbnb guy. He's one of their, I forget what the term is, a super host or whatever. So he's really, it's a big deal for him. And has a lot of different creative ways that he was using home technology, smart home technology in particular, to help him, manage those properties. And I think that this really calls that to mind, because for somebody who's into Airbnb, whether you're traveling and renting one, or if you're a host, that's a great feature. It is something that people want, the ability particularly when you're traveling, right? That's like, I listen to music a fair amount, but when I'm on vacation, I tend to have music playing a lot just because, you're kind of in that mode, vacation mode, and you're relaxing. And so I think that's an interesting aspect, creative thinking on the part of Sonos, I would say, and I'll be curious to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, definitely. I would have loved to have some like little reggae music playing in the background as you walk out of the cottage right onto the beach.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
I had a silent I mean, silence is golden too, I guess, but would have loved to have been able to play some music.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, there are other things we could talk about there, and hopefully, if you're listening, you kind of get a feel for how big this announcement was. I mean, there was a lot to it, and so that's why we wanted to spend a bunch of time on it there. But let's move on. We got 3 more stories that we want to touch on here before we wrap up. And the next one, interesting story. Coldwell Banker has introduced like a smart home staging kit that they're going to sell. And so Caldwell's obviously huge name in real estate. If you're, I'm not sure if they're international, so maybe if you're listening over across the pond and you're not familiar, they're a very large real estate company. I thought this was interesting because I don't remember exactly when it was, but it couldn't have been more than maybe 2 or 3 months ago that I saw a story that Caldwell was working or had worked with Cedia to produce like a continuing education course for their real estate agents to learn about smart home technology. And so Caldwell clearly seems to be a forward-thinking company when it comes to the role of home technology in the home of the future. And so I thought this was a really interesting story.
Yeah, no, this is basically to stage your home as a smart home and advertise smart features, like a Nest learning thermostat would be a nice start into a home as you're trying to sell it. And some of the products they have here, I was pretty impressed with it. So the Nest Learning Thermostat's one, Nest Protect. Okay, well, whatever. Nest Cam, August Smart Lock, August Connect, which is I think the outside portion of that, and the Lutron Caseta wireless lighting starter kit. All of those could be purchased at a little promotional rate for $9.99 for the whole kit, and then I think they go through. They can opt in through an installation through pro.com. So if they don't know how to set all that stuff up, and it can be kind of confusing, and smart locks aren't terribly fun to install. They're fairly easy, but they're not fun. You can hire somebody to come in and set it up. So I think this is a win. I don't think there are many real estate agents out there who really care about the smart home, but there are definitely a lot of people buying homes these days that want to have something in the house that is a little more modern than that old, rusty thermostat that's on the wall.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to a number of real estate agents just in passing, and I think that that's starting to change. I think the real estate agents are understanding that this does have a role, especially with a younger buyer in particular. In fact, I remember the story one of them was telling me, and she was just laughing because she's like, I'll go in and I'll show people this house that's like $1 million plus home with amazing finishes and, huge sliding glass doors out onto the patio with an amazing view and all of this amazing stuff that they can look at. And they'll walk in and they'll be like, "Oh, honey, check out this Nest thermostat." And so I thought that was pretty funny. And that was an actual story that a realtor told me. So, I think there's a lesson to be learned there, and gosh, probably a good time to, take this article and reach out to some real estate agents in the market and say, "Hey, it looks like, Caldwell's doing this, and let me know if you want help kind of setting this stuff up." I think that could be a good conversation starter. So interesting story.
Yeah, definitely. And it in the article, it did say that it was open to both people looking to sell and people just regular homeowners looking to get like a smart home starter kit. And I think all the stuff they listed there, I think it's all pretty good, with maybe the exception of doing like the Nest for only one reason. And I think the Nest isn't going to be HomeKit compatible, but I think all of the rest of the stuff was. So if you had an iPhone, maybe look at getting something like the Ecobee or another different type of thermostat that's going to be able to integrate with HomeKit. And that way, right, everything could be run, as we move into October, September, October time, when iOS 10 hits, everything will be on the phone for you, and you can do all that good stuff right from the phone.
Definitely. All right, well, let's move on. We got 2 more stories here. And this next one I wanted to touch on, and that is Access Networks. So I've mentioned Hagai, and Hagai's I would consider him a friend. I met him a few times in person when I was out working in the Los Angeles market, and has a company out there. He's the CEO of Access Networks. And if you're not familiar with them. They're, I would describe them. Hopefully, this is accurate as a value-added reseller of network technology direct into the integration space. So they're very focused on home technology professionals, and traditionally, I've thought of them, and they have been. I would argue a pretty high-end company, doing things with lines like Ruckus and Cisco, and so they would design and pre-configure the hardware and help support networks in some of the very, very high-end homes that I worked on out in Los Angeles and not just in LA. They're at least a nationwide, possibly even international company, and so pretty big in the networking space. A guy Feiner is his full name, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's also happens to be a board member on CEDIA and the treasurer there. So very connected into the space. Very, I would consider him a guy that gets it totally. And the story here is that Access Networks has actually formed into a partnership with Eero, which I thought was kind of fascinating because Eero is like this, I think Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign, resulting in this wireless Wi-Fi mesh system that really is designed primarily to sell direct to consumer. And so I just thought that was an interesting move on the part of Access Networks to partner up with them. And I think that I know for me, when I heard that, makes me want to take a hard look at Eero as a solution for, possibly for my home and maybe really, quick turn in and out retrofit style jobs that we do that are on the lower end. I feel like if Access Networks is kind of putting their stamp on it and endorsing it, probably a line worth taking a look at.
Right. The way I know Access is that they are, and correct me if I'm wrong, they'll basically, call them and say, I have this building, here's the layout. They'll design and commission a complete, like flawless wireless system and pretty much home network system for the entire house. Is that right?
Yeah. And so obviously not, Wi-Fi, big part of that, but the whole deal. So your managed networks, your VLANs, all that, they'll configure everything and lay it out. I worked with them, like I said, on a couple of very large projects, and they were great. They were really, really good to work with. Definitely a talented team there, and really know what they're doing.
Right.
And so I just, I've always just, considered them a high-end company. And I think that to me, it seems kind of pretty forward-looking for them to be looking at some of these different lines like Eero and trying to figure out, where's the value add and how can they sort of be a guy is quoted as saying they can be an emissary for Eero within the integration channel. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And like I said, makes me kind of want to take a look at Eero and give it a closer examination.
I noticed at the bottom of the article there that there's a link to pro.eero.com, which lets integrators sign up to have access to distribution program details and discounted pricing. So that's pretty cool. They're targeting our market, which is, more than I can say for a number of other the DIY products out there. We said earlier that, voice is hard. Everybody thought Sonos was going to try and do their voice. Voice is hard. No, install is harder.
Yeah.
So you have to have somebody on site who knows what they're doing to put this stuff in, even if it's a very easy product like Eero or Sonos. I think this is good for them, and I think it's hopefully a trend that we'll see moving into the future.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Just seeing companies like this kind of extend their hand out towards our channel and try to figure out ways that we can help and add value and integrate these products into our business that is becoming increasingly just that these cheaper products are the new reality. And so I am encouraged to see that, and definitely planning to stop by the Access Networks booth out at CEDIA and try to get a better feel for what this means and what this partnership actually looks like. And we'll definitely look forward to reporting more on that after the show.
Yep. One more story we have to touch on. Z-Wave, or Sigma Designs, who are the people behind Z-Wave. They build the chips. They have the spec for Z-Wave and the wireless protocol that millions of little devices out there use. They have gone ahead and opened up the Z-Wave spec. No licensing or fees will be required to make a Z-Wave product. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. I saw the story and was anxious to dive in and see what it was about. And I don't know. It seems to me perhaps at least to an extent, a reaction to sort of market dynamics with bigger players like Google and Apple and everybody coming into the space. Maybe not a direct comparison to Z-Wave when you get down to the nuts and bolts and somebody who really understands the space. But, from Z-Wave's perspective, if you zoom out and look at it from a macro level, I think they've got to do things to lower the barrier to entry and continue to build on what they've established. I mean, they are very, very well-established technology when it comes to the smart home. And I think that at the highest levels at Z-Wave, there has to be conversations about, well, how do we make sure that what we've built here over these years doesn't fall by the wayside in the light of more people, more companies entering the space. But who knows how much of that has to do with it. The other thing could simply be that Sigma has decided it's time to open it up, get more developers on board so they can sell more chips. I mean, it could be that simple as well. So hard to say, but I do think it's interesting and ties into a bigger conversation about where technologies like Zigbee and Z-Wave fit in. I think that there are definitely ways that they can stay relevant. I certainly don't believe for a second that they're going to be resigned to a fate of falling by the wayside. But I do think as technologies and companies, they're just going to have to think creatively and make sure that they do things to keep developers behind them and keep manufacturers interested in developing products that work on their technology.
Yeah, reading through the article here from Julie, I think she buried the lead a little bit, as she does from time to time. The bigger news out of this is actually that they're also opening up the S2 security framework, and that is a couple. I think maybe we covered it, maybe we just tweeted about it, but a couple of months ago, Z-Wave won UL approval for using their mesh networking technology in security applications. So that means any security panel moving forward could be a fully Z-Wave S2 security panel. Not that like any of this matters to any installers. It doesn't matter to anybody other than the people making the product. But they could have this. They don't have to pay for the licensing fees to make the product or anything like that. But they will have to buy the silicone from Z-Wave. And I think that's their bigger play at this point is flooding the market with lower cost, inexpensive Z-Wave devices, either for security applications or for home automation applications. I mean, it works both ways. But right. I think this means that you're going to see a lot more of those devices hit the market.
Yeah, definitely. Well, interesting story there. And a week full of interesting stories, I think, and enjoyed Seth sitting down and chatting with you. And again, look forward to CEDIA. We're getting really close here and excited to bring Vin Bruno on from CEDIA next week to get his take on the show and what he's looking for in Dallas and what he's getting excited about. I think that'll be a really fun conversation. So just want to wrap up here tonight with, again, thanking everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate you listening to the show. And if you enjoy the show, find education or entertainment out of it, or both, hopefully, we'd encourage you to take a minute and find out how you can support our efforts here by going to HomeTech.fm/support, where you can learn more about becoming one of our patrons.
Absolutely. Next week, a big CEDIA show coming up, as you alluded to. I think we're going to try and do some CEDIA predictions.
Yeah, we are. We're going to do a few predictions and talk about as well what we're looking forward to at the show. And so, yeah, I think next week will be a lot of fun. I look forward to it.
Excellent. I'll see you next week, Jason.
All right. Sounds good, Seth. Talk soon.